Facemask.
What's going on, y'all? This is John with Facemask Fantasy, and with the 2022 NFL Draft in the books, we're here to break down these rookies with their new landing spots in mind. First up, James Cook, who was selected by the Buffalo Bills with the 63rd overall pick. The Bills had been linked to Breece Hall all offseason and to a lesser extent, Kenneth Walker III and Isaiah Spiller, but instead they opt for James Cook, in the second round no less. But who is James Cook, and can he be a viable fantasy option for years to come? James Cook is 5'10", 199 pounds, and is Dalvin Cook's younger brother. He played 4 seasons at Georgia, operating as the secondary back to Zamir White in 2021, and from 2018 to 2020, he operated as the secondary back to Elijah Holyfield and DeAndre Swift. Now, from 2018 to 2020, James never exceeded 50 carries in a season, but still compiled 1,503 yards on 230 carries at a 6.5 yards per carry clip and 14 total touchdowns throughout his college career. His senior year in 2021 was a bit different, as Cook finished with 113 carries, averaging 6.4 yards per carry and reeling in 27 receptions and scoring 11 total touchdowns on top of getting a national championship win. James Cook is impressed with an all-around skill set, recording 67 receptions and 727 yards in 46 career games, and according to Pro Football Focus's Mike Renner, Georgia running back James Cook was the best receiving back in the draft this year. But Cook wasn't just a receiving back, showing above average elusiveness and breakaway ability as a rusher, as evidenced by his high yards per carry throughout college, never dipping below 6.1 yards per carry over 4 straight years, and his overall 6.6 college yards per carry ranks in the 85th percentile for the running back position. At the combine, he ran a 4.42 in the 40-yard dash, which is in the 95th percentile for running backs, and generated a speed score according to Player Profiler of 104.3, which is in the 78th percentile. As for how he matches up to his all-pro brother Dalvin Cook, the two Cooks rank fairly similarly as athletes. James Cook is taller than his brother but is lighter, faster, and more explosive. Dalvin Cook is more stocky and more powerful, but still demonstrated the speed needed to be a big-time playmaker in the NFL, which is to say, Dalvin is more of a feature back with 3-down ability, whereas James Cook should operate more as a 3rd-down option due to his slighter stature, though he still has the upside to operate as a lead back in a committee akin to a Chase Edmonds or maybe even a Michael Carter. It's not all roses though for James Cook, who was drafted in the 2nd round. As well, he has the draft pedigree and he has the family ties and the receiving production, and is now drafted to one of the best teams in the league. He joins a committee led by Devin Singletary, who is not going anywhere, and Zach Moss, everyone's favorite back to hate on, is still on the roster, and both Singletary and Moss combined for 300 carries last year. And Duke Johnson was signed in the offseason, though I think the James Cook addition makes Duke Johnson's skill set a little bit redundant on the roster. Even so, he's still there. And all this on a team where Josh Allen vultures key short down and goal line work more than pretty much any quarterback in recent memory. And James Cook also just doesn't have the body type to be a lead back in the NFL. Despite standing at 5 foot 11 inches, he only weighs 199 pounds. He owns an 8th percentile BMI of 27.8, which frankly is bad. You may think BMI shouldn't matter too much, but it is a metric by which we can judge whether or not a prospect at the running back position has the requisite build to be able to stand up to an NFL workload. Yes, he compares to other receiving backs in the league when looking at his production in college, in James White, Dion Lewis, Nyheim Hines, J.D. McKissic, maybe even in Austin Eckler, and for you old heads, Chris Thompson and Danny Woodhead. But James White has a BMI in the 51st percentile. Dion Lewis had a 52nd percentile BMI. Nyheim Hines has a 50th percentile BMI. Eckler had a 34th percentile BMI coming out, and it took him a few years to grow into his frame. Chris Thompson had a 50th percentile BMI. Woodhead had a BMI in the 41st percentile, and James Cook's BMI is in the 8th percentile. J.D. McKissic is the only back that I can find who has a BMI at or lower than Cook's, and remember, it took McKissic 5 years in the league to build his body up to the point where he was able to be utilized as a real weapon on even just a part-time basis in Washington. Now, none of these backs have the draft capital investment that the Bills used on Cook. Cook was drafted in the 2nd round, and all those backs listed were drafted in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, or were undrafted free agents altogether. So Cook should get a look earlier than those other backs listed. Cook most likely will not have to wait the 5 years that J.D. McKissic had to wait to see significant playing time in the NFL. But it is is a possibility that he is sparsely utilized for the first year. Duke Johnson gives the Bills some time to let James Cook build his body up to be able to better handle the rigors of an NFL season. He's also a passing down specialist on a team that has Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, added Jamison Crowder, who should take over the role that Cole Beasley vacated, added O.J. Howard, who further complicates the short to intermediate pass game situations that Cook is going to be involved in, as they also still have Dawson Knox, and they also added Khalil Shakir in the draft, who should take over the Emmanuel Sanders role. On top of that, Devin Singletary had 40 receptions last year, and Zach Moss and Duke Johnson are still there. So what does this mean for fantasy? He may not get the work we normally see a second-round running back get early in his career. I, for one, am not drafting James Cook in rookie drafts because I believe he will be somewhat overdrafted. And this is coming from a die-hard Bills fan. Bills Mafia stand up. But still, James Cook is going to be overdrafted. Second-round draft capital, going to the Bills, he's going to be overdrafted. And I, for one, am not going to be one of the fantasy players that is overdrafting James Cook. I am going to be waiting until the owner that drafts him sours on his outlook after a slow start. And yes, I am predicting he has a slow start to his NFL career. I'll pounce on him when his value is lowest and seek to acquire him mid-season. Remember that Cam Akers, completely different type of running back, but Cam Akers was a bust through the first half of his first year. Late second-round pick A.J. Dillon didn't show up until halfway through his second season. Running backs sometimes take time, and I expect James Cook to take more time than most due to his slight stature as it stands right now. Never has a receiving back come in and started out the gate hot. Eckler took some years. White took some years. McKissick took 5 years. Dion Lewis took some years. Hines took a few years too. Chris Thompson took a few years. Chase Edmonds took a few years. It'll take some time for James Cook, and I'll be waiting till the owner that overdrafts him gets impatient and fed up and decides to cut bait. Then I'll pounce and find a way to get the Bills' 22 second rounder on my roster for much less of an investment on my part in Dynasty. And in redraft, I'm pretty much ignoring James Cook altogether unless I do go 0 RB and wait until really the last pick in a redraft league. And I doubt that he's going to be there because, again, fantasy players are going to be high on the Bills' second rounder in redraft as well. So in redraft, I'm probably not going to get him. In Dynasty, I'm going to wait until he predictably has a slow start coming out the gate, and then maybe I'll be able to pounce on him in week 6, week 7 once the owner gets fed up with him. But I do think the time will come when Cook will start to resemble Nyheim Hines, J.D. McKissick, and James White. We will just have to be patient while he grows into his frame and learns the ins and outs of the NFL. But what do you guys think about James Cook being drafted by the Bills in the second round in this past NFL draft? Put your thoughts in the comments section below, or better yet, tune into one of our weekly live streams. We have a live stream every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. EST, so come through, throw your question about James Cook or any other NFL player or situation into the chat, and we can have a conversation about it in real time. But my name is John, this is Facemask Fantasy. Thank you for listening and have a great day.